Okay, pucker your lips. Chautauqua. Chautauqua. We have our Native American forebears to credit for why so many places across this great country of ours are called what they are. And in the case of Chautauqua, we can thank the Iroquois, an indigenous confederacy of tribes known as the people of the Longhouse, who spoke of the lake in upstate New York that they were compelled to explore as if they were two moccasins bound together. And it would be that very same place that in 1874, two gentlemen, John Vincent and Lewis Miller, envisioned a summer campsite for Methodist Sunday school teachers, giving lasting voice to the Chautauqua movement, now nearly 150 years old. It was an idea that historically swept the nation, founded a mothership, the Chautauqua Institute in Western New York, and presses forward today in its rebirth. Theodore Roosevelt, one of our most prized of presidents, hailed it as the most American thing in America. The Chautauqua movement reflected a nationwide interest in the professionalization of teaching. Vincent and Miller were very clear that their intent was educational rather than revivalist. Podiums was on their mind, not pulpits. Lifelong learning was the vision, and they had 4 pillars to prove it: culturally, intellectually, spiritually, and recreationally. Among other things, the gentlemen, in their efforts to set a permanent anchor on the shores of Lake Chautauqua, also conceived of designing a correspondence course to bring a college opportunity to working and middle-class people who would otherwise be denied one. So it was in the late 1800s that the founder's dream became so popular it spread across the country like wildfire. And by 1900, independent assemblies, permanent fixtures with buildings and staff, just like the Institute on the lake, began to pepper the landscape, particularly in the Midwest. In fact, the name itself, Chautauqua, became shorthand for organized gatherings meant to introduce people to the great thinkers, new ideas, and issues of public concern. As well, tent Chautauquas, veritable traveling shows, naturally evolved as this idea, whose time had come, gained very serious traction and became the principal expression of the movement. The breadth of their programming varied from Ivy League lecturers and Shakespearean actors to animal acts and vaudeville farce. And at their height, some 12,000 communities had hosted a Chautauqua of their own. And our very own Athens, Georgia, was no exception. Eclipsed by the wheels of time, both movements found themselves sidelined in the 1930s. Historians cite a serious wave of evangelism that the Chautauquans' meeting formats could not satisfy, plus the birth and the ascendancy of the car and its culture, the radio and the talkies. And then there was the death knell, the Great Depression. However, the good news is that even though the Chautauqua Institute and those independent assemblies suffered some undeniably hard times, they, like the tent Chautauquas, are all experiencing a renaissance. And one shining example of that is right down the road in Greenville, South Carolina. Her very own Chautauqua, History Comes Alive. Truly an idea whose time has come again. So it was in 1965 that our United States Congress established the National Endowment for the Humanities. And partnering with a number of state humanities councils, ignited the public's affection for arts and culture in that public square. And it would set the stage for that town's brilliant revival of her very own version of the Tent Chautauquas. It's called Greenville Chautauqua's History Comes Alive. And everyone is in, from the chambers of commerce to the humanities councils, to downtown authorities, to public libraries. Every summer, for 2 weeks, they have a festival where they host 40 first-rate historical reenactments. It's like watching a veritable big top unfold on multiple greens before the people's eyes for the last 20 years. Word spread about this phenomenon so fast that the Greenville Chautauqua realized they needed to generously partner with metropolises of like minds. Enter Spartanburg, South Carolina, Asheville, North Carolina, Brevard, North Carolina. And now, since we here in Athens have founded our very own Chautauqua in 2019, we've been added to that tri-star roster and proudly can claim to be the only site in Georgia on the circuit. Our collaborative with Greenville adds our very own acclaimed historical interpreters, just as others across the country have brought great speakers of the day, where people can gather together face to face to learn, to exchange ideas, to create community, and oh yes, have fun. In response to the COVID-19 pandemic, Athens Chautauqua, like the whole world, has gone virtual. And so since the fall of 2020, we have successfully launched a series of Zoom presentations, like Sonny Kelly, like Bruce Collier. The spirit of Chautauqua is more than any one performance. It's a chance to be part of history come alive for all of us. A chance to debate the Constitution with our forefathers, to laugh out loud with Mark Twain, get ourselves arrested with Rosa Parks. The Athens Chautauqua Society wants to thank the University of Georgia's Torrance Center's Festival of Ideas, and in particular, Dr. Anna Abraham, for inviting us to be part of your festival this weekend as we celebrate our rebirth of a century-old start. So with our remaining time, we'd like to take you to the movies. 3, in fact. The first is a video clip of several members of the Athens Chautauqua Society Board.
I didn't know anything about Chautauqua till maybe 2 years ago. I only just arrived in Georgia. When I found out about it, it was almost like a dream, a combination of history and performing, because I've been in acting for a long time and I just love to do it.
I visited Chautauqua about 7 times during that period of 70s to the late 1990s, and just loved every minute of it. It's a phenomenal place. It's hard to describe. Everybody, I think, would love to experience Chautauqua. And of course, during that process of visiting the Chautauqua Institution, learned about the Chautauqua movement and the Chautauqua Trail and all the wonderful things that are happening around the country. So it means a lot to me, and I've really enjoyed my exposure and my learning about the Chautauqua movement.
And I just thought it sounded wonderful. One of the things that's very important to me is preserving history for the future, for our children. I think that's extremely important.
And we went 1 week out of the 9 weeks. Can you imagine you have 9 weeks? And we got 1 week. We just could not believe what they had going on in those 4 pillars, whether it's even recreation and theater and opera and lectures. This is what's so unbelievable about it. No matter what genre of literature or art or performance, they have something for everybody there.
To the Chautauqua movement, I heard about it when we lived in New York. Many of our friends went up every summer. And when we came to Athens, I was fortunate enough to know Harvey Biskin and knew that he went every summer. And when I would drive him to various meetings, he would tell me about the experiences. It was the one thing that he really enjoyed. And so I had an interest in it.
Chautauqua appeals to all generations, from older adults to younger adults to children. It's a great thing for families to do together. And the thing that really convinced me of that was I went to a performance where a reenactor portrayed President Teddy Roosevelt. And after he did his act on stage, they started passing a microphone around the audience to let people ask questions. Well, a young boy stood up and addressed the president and said, "When you were in the White House, did you have any pets?" And Teddy boomed back, "That's an excellent question." And he knew so much about Teddy Roosevelt, he launched into this story about how his two sons sneaked their pony into the White House, up the stairs, into the bedroom of their sick brother. And he Teddy concluded with, "And Edith didn't like that at all." So.
The second movie is a conversation with a group of actors who portray historic figures professionally, Chautauqua style. They make the past come alive on stage through solo interpretations. Such exercises are far more than mere performances because they choose a person from our collective past. They research that subject matter and they dramatize the character's life. 2 Q&As follow the presentation, one where the actor is in character and one where he or she serves as a budding expert on the character's backstory. Again, the key is audience participation. We, the Athens Chautauqua Society, want the youth of our community to have a chance to try their hand at it too. And we're tentatively calling it the Youth Performance Academy. More on that later.
You know, it's funny, I believe as an artist, and Bruce, you can probably relate to this as well, poetry, performance, they flow through us, even in our study of history, because people like Winston Churchill, for example, were so artful in their oratory, in their thought. It's a form of poetry, right? Even in his diplomacy and his statesmanship. And I found the same thing as I perform the work of people like James Baldwin or W.E.B. Du Bois. And what I found is I think about Billie Holiday's song, All of Me. Why not take all of me, right? I don't know that she wrote it, but she made that song famous, right? And I think that we as Americans, we have to come to a place, especially as we're training up young performers and thinkers and civic engagers, that we're not representing a perfect humanity or a perfect country. We're representing a beautiful humanity and a beautiful, amazing country with a wonderful ideal laid out in the Declaration of Independence. And we oftentimes don't quite meet the mark, but the fact that we're aspiring toward it makes us Americans. And the fact that we do believe in liberty and justice for all, I think makes us better humans. And so I think that performance and connecting civic engagement with performance and working with youth allows us to help them to tap into their humanity and to learn to love themselves for who they are and what they are, and learn to love their country and their country people for who they are and what they are. And then and only then, I think, can we come to a place where we can come to the public sphere and be quote unquote civil.
In developing a character, you see the complexities of your character. And that's one of the things that we as adult Chautauquans learn as we're creating our portrayal, but that's such a valuable thing for young people to understand too. You know, Abraham Lincoln was a flawed man, and they can't necessarily convey that in a school lesson, but a Chautauquan can convey it, and a young person who's doing a portrayal of Abraham Lincoln is bound to make those kinds of discoveries.
When we disperse those illusions and we say even the quote unquote greatest people in history cried themselves to sleep, had moments of regret, didn't know which way to go, made mistakes, almost didn't see it through or didn't see it through places in their life. I think that inspires a great deal of hope, because our job is to show who they were at that time in the evolution of the world. So it becomes good news, bad news. And that's another part of Chautauqua that I'm very interested and keen on. Where have we gone? How far have we come? Let's celebrate that. But then we have to pause and go, why does this sound so familiar to us? Why is this creeping up? Why haven't we learned these lessons? And how can we watch these people's mistakes? That to me is the primary value of Chautauqua right now, where we're at.
The third movie is a conversation with a group of people interested in making a more perfect union with us. Right here at home and Chautauqua style again. Our board shares a very strong conviction, and that is that our country deserves a closer look at how democracies fulfill their promise. Where do we find the truth of the matter, the facts in the case? What are the forces that threaten our understanding of or broad-mindedness around an issue? And why is the instinct for mutual respect lost to anger and disconnect sometimes? And most of all, how do we fix it? So we, again, the Athens Chautauqua Society, want the youth of our community to be fully engaged in the world they're inheriting from us. And we're tentatively calling that the Public Square Academy.
And so when I work with social studies teachers to be and make this pitch, it seems like a more difficult pitch in 2021 than it was in 2008 or 1997 when I started this. So I'm excited about the experiential aspect of, issues aside, the issues do matter. But what I want my students to experience is helping the facilitation of 14, 15, 16, 17-year-olds see what it's like just to engage in a kind of conversation that they may not have ever participated in before, which is, a civil dialogue around an important issue of mutual interest. And so I'm not, haven't done the National Issues Forum protocol yet as kind of a model for making discussion happen. I've been on the website, and I believe I'm scheduled, Margaret, to participate in my very first National Issues Forum on the 15th with you. Okay. So I will have experienced that. But from what I read on the website about how the preparation works, the curriculum works to prepare students, and I actually am keenly interested in how it actually plays out for that hour when we actually have the conversation. If it goes according to its description on the website, this seems like custom fit for my students to see a model of how you bring civil dialogue and discourse into your future classroom, and a sense of, 14, 15, 16-year-olds are capable of talking and being together in ways that, only schools are our last bastion of democracy. I agree with Oglesby. I don't know Mark, but I would agree with him. So I'm just mostly into the experiential component. I want my students to walk out of the academy feeling like, wow, students are capable. And this could be part of what I do as a civic educator.
I am the president for the nation's Center for Civic Education, which works both around both the country and the world to work within the civic education and then the constitutional education space. And so I've actually been really interested and excited to see some of the work that folks are talking about here, because there's really no question in my mind that we're at a time in our history where a civic and constitutional education is really core, no matter what age you are. And unlike so many other different subjects that I celebrate, like math and science, and I certainly do, but civics is the only subject that is actually in every classroom. It's actually in every workspace. It's everywhere. And I think that's something that is really important to celebrate. And I think it's something that's really important to be cognizant of. So the idea that everybody is kind of forming around of coming together and making sure that a civic and constitutional education is available for even more people, I think is extraordinary and is something that when I look around the country and I get to see the great work that's happening. I'm currently actually in California. I'm usually up in New York, and I get to see everything in between. It's really wonderful to have a chance to see what everybody's trying to put together. And I have to, obviously give a great shout out to Peter for bringing me in and looking at this from the 50+ year history that my organization has, in ensuring that this information in a nonpartisan fashion is available to give people the tools so that they can have an understanding and be able to have complex conversations about some of the big issues that we are facing as a society. So to hear exactly what Todd just talked about, to think about this in a really broad sense, because we're the idea of having both students that are going to be engaged, but of course, students of different ages that can then serve as mentors and look at their own learning journey. There's nothing like a civic and constitutional education. And it's one of the reasons why it's very exciting to have a chance as the center to be a piece of this puzzle and to share in this work that everybody's looking forward to getting started.
Again, I cannot thank you all enough at the University of Georgia, in particular the Torrance Center, and most especially Dr. Anna Abraham. Welcome to Dogtown for our participation in your inaugural Festival of Ideas. What a great idea. Indeed.